my dear followers, friends, viewers, or welcome if it's the first time that you are watching my YouTube channel, My Paranormal and Mystery TV. And first of all, I want to thank you very much, you, my really dear, lovely followers, friends, from the bottom of my heart. I really send you a very huge, sincere hug and kisses. These are festivity days, Christmas days, and the so-called winter days, the winter festivities. But this doesn't mean that we must put on our faces fake smiles, sending fake wishes, or fake to live in a happy, in a suddenly happy, magical days. Not at all, and fake that everything in the world is okay. No, it's not me, because I'm just people know me that I'm out of the box. I'm not hypocritical at all. I'm completely an outsider. So I want to wish you really peace, health, love, and joy every day of the years, and not only all these festivity days because society wants us to be like so conformist, so stupid, with fake happy faces. I'm not that kind, and I guess not you that you are following me. So I want to tell you that this documentary and the videos I immediately am going to show you on my studio, I will make you watch really creepy videos about something that is considered a bit taboo topic. The topic is real killer babies. As I read these, think about that. These real killer babies, this is what some criminologists stated. Real killer babies are capable to do unimaginable murders, horrifying, brutal, ferox murders, full of cruelty that rarely even adult killers are not able to be so full of cruelty and remorse at trials. So immediately let's go to watch these absolutely creepy, horrifying videos. Real evilish killer babies. Let's go. I warn you, some images could disturb the sensitivity of the viewers. I start with Mary Bell. We are in Newcastle, 1968, in England. This lovely baby looked like an angelic doll. Instead, she's one of the fiercest killer child of history. I start.
Bell was just 11 years old when she strangled to death 2 young boys in the Scotswood area of Newcastle's West End. One was 4 and one was only 3 years old, one of which...
She really looked like a very gorgeous doll, and instead
was described as strikingly pretty, with an innocent face and sparkling blue eyes. Mary Flora Bell lived with her mother, Elizabeth McCricket, otherwise known as Betty Bell, in the Scotswood area of Newcastle, and she had Mary when she was just 17 years old. It's recorded by hospital staff that when Mary was born, Betty said to the nurses, "Take the thing away from me." Betty was a bipolar, alcoholic sex worker and would regularly travel to Glasgow to earn money on the streets. She would leave Mary with friends, family and other acquaintances for sometimes days on end. Betty specialised in sadomasochism and kept whips and chains in the house. It's quite likely that she was involved in sexual asphyxiation as part of these sex acts. Betty would often force Mary to become involved with her paying clients and suffered repeated sexual abuse from aged 4. Mary's dad was called Billy Bell, who was an armed robber, alcoholic and a career criminal who was in and out of jail. Both Betty and Mary would have been subjected to repeated domestic abuse, and Mary would often be left to fend for herself in what would have been a chaotic, dysfunctional and violent family life. Mary consequently became a chronic bedwetter and was afraid to go to sleep, in fear that she would wet the bed, as her mother would regularly rub her face in it and the mattress left out for everyone to see. It's also recorded that her mother attempted to kill Mary on at least a couple of occasions when she was given sleeping pills and told they were Smarties. On one occasion, Mary ended up in hospital with an overdose and was forced to have her stomach pumped. As a child, Mary was described as being a compulsive liar, volatile in her moods, violent towards other children, and lacked general social.
it was difficult for her to make friends.
Sinister towards other children in her area, and she would regularly hit them and even choke them. The other kids were frightened of Mary, and in turn she would be teased and ridiculed. Mary did have one friend that was always with her, and that was her next door neighbour, Norma Bell, no relation. Norma was 2 years older than Mary, but Mary was seen as the alpha. Norma was described as submissive and a bit simple, and she usually did what Mary told her to do. On one occasion at the Woodlands Crescent Daycare Centre, Mary attacked 3 young girls who were in the sandpit. 7-year-old Pauline was grabbed by the throat, began strangling her, and had sand forced into her mouth. Norma tried to stop Mary, and Pauline managed to wriggle free before any serious harm was done.
And Mary had grabbed us by
This lovely baby and his brutal murder by Mary Bell.
The 5th of May 1968, 3 boys called Walter, Freddie and John were scrounging for scrap timber to build a loft for racing pigeons. They went into the derelict building of 85 St Margaret Road and went upstairs to find the motionless body of a 4-year-old Martin Brown. He was laid on his back on the floorboards with his arms stretched above his head. Apart from a few flecks of blood and foam around his mouth, there were no obvious signs of violence. The boys ran outside and alerted men working on electricity cables. One of them, called John, ran upstairs and tried to resuscitate Martin, but to no avail. As he was doing this, Mary and Norma Bell turned up at the bedroom door and they were shooed away. As police and paramedics were attending the scene, Mary and Norma attended the address of Martin's auntie and told her, "One of your sister's bairns has had an accident. We think it's Martin, but we can't tell as there's blood all over him." The police were baffled by the death, as it was initially put down as accidental. Even the post-mortem was...
How is it possible? Read it with your eyes. We murder. We did murder Martin. It's really creepy. Maribel was only 10 years old. Horrifying. Really disquieting. And listen what happened.
After that, the school installed silent alarms, and 6 days later the nursery was burgled again. Police found Mary and Norma inside, and they were charged with the burglary. They denied the burglary a few days earlier. In the coming weeks, Mary would often boast about killing Martin, but it wasn't really taken seriously. She would also regularly visit Martin's mother June at her house, and with a grin on her face would ask how she was feeling, and then would start giggling. On one occasion she asked if she could see Martin, but June said no, she couldn't as he was dead. Then Mary said,
"Listen to the horrific request Maribel did to Martin's mother."
His coffin. So you can imagine that June was very distressed by all of this. On the afternoon of Wednesday, 31st of July, 3-year-old Brian Howe went missing. He had last been seen with one of his brothers, Mary and Norma Bell, and a small dog called Lassie. The search party went looking, and even Mary and Norma suggested to the family that they could help in the search and led them on a wild goose chase, despite knowing exactly where the body was. At 11:30 that night, Brian's body was found wedged between some large boulders on an area of wasteland called Tin Lizzie's. There was blood and foam coming from his mouth, and the police on the scene quickly established that he had been strangled to death. There was bruising and scratchings around his neck, compression marks around his nose where it had been pinched, 5 puncture wounds on his right leg and 1 on his left. They also found that the skin on his penis had been mutilated. His hair had been cut, and the letter N had been carved into his stomach with something sharp, but a rudimentary attempt had been made to change this to an M. DCI Jim Dobson quickly saw the similarities between the two deaths and suspected that Mary and Norma maybe had been involved. Despite this, police visited over 1,000 homes and spoke to over 1,200 children. Mary and Norma were quizzed numerous times. Mary in particular was smiling all the time, and their stories changed regularly. A few days later, Mary stated that she suddenly remembered that she'd seen an 8-year-old boy, A, hitting Brian around the face, and he had some silver-coloured scissors with him that were damaged in some way. A few feet away from the scene, the police had found bent scissors, but didn't disclose this to anyone during the investigation. But when questioning Mary and Norma, they both described some damaged scissors and had now put themselves at the scene. Only the police and the killer would have known about the scissors. When the police questioned the family of the 8-year-old, it was discovered that he was away from the area on the date in question. On the 4th of August, DCI Dobson interviewed Norma again and confronted her with the evidence that was now starting to build up. It was here that Norma described Mary as killing Brian by strangling him and telling Norma that she had enjoyed it. She further described Mary using a razor to cut Brian's stomach and where the razor was hidden. She later took the police to the scene where it was recovered. Mary was brought in the following day and confronted with Norma's statement. Mary was defensive and agitated, but were forced to let her go as there was not enough evidence to charge her. It was on the 7th of August when Brian was to be buried that DCI Dobson knew Mary was involved. When Brian's body was brought out of the house, he saw Mary laughing and rubbing her hands together. He knew he had to arrest them both before another murder happened. They were both arrested the following day and proceeded to blame each other for the murder of Brian. Handwriting samples from their school books tied them to the first burglary at the nursery, and they were both charged with the murder and the first burglary. In one of Mary's school books they also found a drawing of Martin's body and a short narrative.
Look at this! It's the original one! It's horrifying! Mary didn't feel any remorse. She enjoyed her horrifying crimes. This is something that left me completely stunned. So much ferox, so much brutality and cruelty towards those little babies. It's something really shocking, really.
In it, she had drawn a tablet bottle that the police hadn't disclosed during the investigation either. Later, forensic evidence tied the girls to both murder scenes by clothing fibres found on both bodies as belonging to the girls. They were then charged with the murder of Martin. During the whole...
On the 5th of December 1968,
Brian, and after psychological analysis was deemed to be suffering from a psychopathic personality disorder, and sent to detention for an unspecified period of time after being convicted of manslaughter under a diminished responsibility. During the trial, her mother Betty continuously disrupted the trial with outbursts, and it turned into a bit of a soap opera. During the trial, the jury were not shown any evidence of Mary's own physical, psychological and sexual abuse. Norma was acquitted of all charges. Mary was then sent to Red Bank Male Youth Detention Centre in Lancashire, as there were no...
And then Mary Bell was released from prison in 1980. And now one of the most shocking cases in criminal history. The slaughter of the little James Bulger by two murderers who were only 10 years old, Robert Thompson and John Venables, one of the most famous and shocking, creepiest cases of history. Immediately. And you will see these are the baby killers. Something really Robert Thompson and John Venables.
Were charged. They're also the last pictures you're allowed to see. A court order means more recent ones can't be shown. We can't speak to anyone involved in their care or custody, or say where they're held. The legal restrictions mean very little hard information has ever emerged about Thompson and Venables in the last 8 years. Recently, the Lord Chief Justice said they'd made remarkable progress. But how do we know? How has the system dealt with 10-year-old murderers? What treatment have they had? Are they still dangerous? Up until now, we've only heard from those who want to keep them locked up for life. So tonight we take a deeper look at their time in custody. And some of what we found is so controversial, it's not surprising it's been kept quiet. The secrecy is in stark contrast to the very public way this case unfolded. We all recognise the images. The Strand shopping centre in Bootle. A young child being led away by 2 older boys. Police hoped it was just teenagers messing around, and 2-year-old James would be returned safely. Denise, what is your appeal to the public?
If you've got me baby, to bring them back.
the mother is looking for everybody, hopes to find the little baby alive. Instead, look.
The news, and it seemed the whole country shared the bulger's anguish. Then a group of boys playing on the railway line found a child's body. James had been cut in half by a train.
Well, it's fairly obvious that from the pattern of injuries that he hadn't been killed by the train. I mean, been run over by the train.
And then, listen, this is the little, so pretty James Bulger, cut in half, and the autopsy reveals something shocking. Listen to him.
Obvious that from the pattern of injuries that he hadn't been killed by the train. I mean, been run over by the train, but he had a lot of head injuries, so we weren't dealing with a train death.
So tell me what the post-mortem established then about the injuries.
The post-mortem showed that he had a lot of what are called split wounds or lacerations, mainly to his head, which were the result of being struck heavy blows with the bricks and the iron bar that were found at the scene.
A 2-year-old battered to death, apparently by other children. It seemed impossible to believe. Over the next few days, about
And
6 youngsters were
listen
questioned.
what the detective says.
So when they said 10-year-old boys, you think, oh well, it's got to be done. Information's come in, so we've got to go and see him and interview him.
But you
to
weren't
eliminate
expecting
him.
that they could possibly be the ones?
Oh no, I didn't. I don't think the other detectives did as well.
Phil Roberts led the team that arrested Robert Thompson. He lived a few hundred yards from where James's body had been found.
Robert came down. He was neat, tidy, clean, ready for school. So I thought, oh well, I've got to tell him. So I sat him down on the sofa. I went down on my knees, sort of eye-to-eye contact. Said, Robert, I'm here because of James' murder. He says, yeah, no. She said, but we've been told that you might be involved in it. Then he started sort of panicking, sort of crying, but not crying with tears, just no tears, but crying. But he was afraid more than anything.
Robert Thompson.
A couple of miles away, on the Norris Green estate, another team arrested John Venables and took him to Lower Lane police station.
John Venables.
The first thing I noticed about John is that he looked far younger than the 10 years that he was in actual fact. He looked like an 8-year-old. Little cherubic, angelic-looking face, supported by his mum, who was a nice, polite person. Would never have dreamt that he could be capable of a crime like this.
Robert was just remarkably young. That would be the first thing that struck you. He was younger perhaps than anybody had ever seen in a custodial setting before, let alone the seriousness of the offence. He was just so small, he was clear.
This is the first audio tape released from the police in the interrogation. Listen to it.
These interviews.
What time was that? When was that?
I don't know.
So what happened?
Don't know. He grabbed at the baby's hand and just both around the strands. And then he let him go loose.
Did he?
When we were by the church, he let him go.
And you were with John then? You shook your head? You shook your head?
Yeah, I told him to take him back.
You did what?
Told him to take him back.
You told him to take
I
him
don't
back?
know
All right,
blame.
Bobby. No, you're not getting all the blame. You're just asking your son. We're
Yeah,
trying to
well,
find
you
the truth.
still make the blame.
Wait a minute, Bobby. Listen. calm yourself down for a minute, okay?
Listen to it!
Having an even harder time with John Venables. For the first 4 interviews, he lied. He was never even in the Strand. So halfway through the second day, police told him Robert had already admitted they were both there.
And suddenly there was silence, and he said, "Yes, we were in the Strand, but honestly, Mum, we never grabbed a..."
Other original tape released from the police.
He said that the 2 of you were in the Strand and that you saw the little boy.
We never.
That's the God's honest truth.
God's honest truth, I'm telling you that we never. He was too scared. He was probably too scared.
And he said that you took him by the hand and led him out of the Strand shops.
We never. He's a liar.
Calm down, I guess.
Alright, come on, love. It's alright, come on, alright. I never got the boy. I never killed him.
Appalling truth began to emerge. From the Strand, they'd walked James up to the nearby canal. Robert made the child kneel and look in the water, hoping he'd fall in and drown. And earlier in the day, they'd tried to snatch another young boy, but his mother had caught them just in time.
More than 30
Saw them
people.
dragging James along. The child was crying, his head bleeding, but nobody intervened. And this is where it ended. The railway tracks at Walton. Just a few freight trains rumble through on their way to the docks. Despite 2 days
And
of
now,
questioning,
listen
neither boy
what
would admit
John Venables in the end.
The breakthrough came with John Venables. Police thought he wouldn't tell the truth because he was frightened of his parents' reaction. So between interviews, Susan Venables told her son they'd love him whatever he'd done.
And then he made what were the first admissions, and it was, "Yeah, okay, I killed the baby, I'm very sorry. Can you tell his mum I'm sorry," I think he said. And then from then he made certain admissions, well, certainly that he was present and inflicted some of the injuries caused on James.
Lane, Robert Thompson, denied taking any part in the killing. However, there was strong forensic evidence that he kicked James in the face. There was blood on his shoes.
Immediately when the news is out, look.
Public anger was almost unprecedented. There was a near riot the first time the 2 appeared in court. Nine months after the killing, a formal Crown Court trial. The accused, known only as A and B. Back in 1993, the law assumed that a child of between 10 and 14 didn't always know right from wrong. The prosecution had to prove they did. So the trial hinged not on whether they killed James, there was never much doubt about that, but whether they fully understood that taking him away from his mother and battering him to death was seriously wrong. That was all the legal system needed to know. The jury found them guilty of murder, and for juveniles there's only one sentence: to be detained during Her Majesty's pleasure. The judge then made a decision which has become a major factor in this case. He identified the boys. Their school photographs are now recognised by almost everyone in the country. But at the same time, the judge ordered that no details of their future in custody could be revealed. It means Thompson and Venables will always be remembered, but only as murderers.
This is really a real horror. We are in St. Martin's, Missouri, the case of Bustamante.
Missouri, too. Families had no idea they were on the brink of a tragedy that would shatter their lives and shake the community of St. Martin's to its core. Elizabeth Alton, a bright-eyed 9-year-old, was known for her playful spirit and the joy she brought to those around her. She lived with her family, 4 houses down from Alyssa Bustamante, a teenager whose outward appearance masked the turmoil within. Alyssa Dailene Bustamante was born on January 28, 1994, into a life filled with instability. Her mother's battle with addiction and her father's incarceration left Alyssa and her siblings in the care of their grandparents, Gary and Karen Brooke. As Alyssa entered her teenage years, signs of distress began to surface.
He had mixed it with music and posted it showing her grabbing an electric cattle fence.
She's only 9! Only 9 years old!
Grab the electrified fence.
Around 2 friends and family started to notice changes in her behavior. A suicide attempt led to her hospitalization, revealing the depth of her struggles with mental health. In the days leading up to October 21st, Alyssa dug a grave in the woods behind her house, the beginning to the grim act she was planning. On that fateful Wednesday, as the sun began to set, Alyssa set her plan into motion. She persuaded her younger sister to invite Elizabeth to the woods under the pretense of friendly play. Unknown to the innocent child, she was walking into a trap meticulously laid by someone she considered a neighbor and a friend.
Okay, put it. Slit her throat and strangled her.
Strangled her?
Mm-hmm.
You strangled her with your hands?
Yes.
Okay. Did she have a knife on you?
Yes.
Did you cut her throat at any time?
Yes.
Cut her throat afterwards?
Mm-hmm.
The journal she kept became a key piece of evidence, as it contained a haunting entry from the day of the murder. Alyssa had attempted to obscure the words with scribbles, but forensic experts were able to recover the chilling confession that detailed the killing with a sense of pride and exhilaration. The words, "I just f***ing killed someone, I them and their throat and them, now they're dead. I don't know how to feel ATM," followed by, "It was amazing. As soon as you get over the oh me god I can't do this feeling, it's pretty enjoyable. I'm kinda nervous and shaky though right now. Okay, I gotta go to church now, LOL," were penned down, providing a stark and disturbing account of her actions. In a moment of remorse though, Alyssa addressed the court and the Alton family during her sentencing. Her voice trembled as she expressed her regret, saying, "If I could give my life to bring her back, I would. I'm sorry."
Basically, the main reason for accepting the offer was to avoid the absolute certainty of life without parole. If there was another option, then there would have been no reason to have accepted that offer.
She took a plea deal and was sentenced to life imprisonment with concurrent 30-year imprisonment. Alyssa seemed to have the demons she's battling with, and that was why she did what she did. But what about a teen who allowed fear to cloud his sense of judgment and do?
Here we are in Allentown, Pennsylvania.
He entered the world on March 17th, 1984. His early life was marred by the shadow of his father, Steve, a man whose struggles with addiction and violence instilled an atmosphere of fear within the family home. Melissa, Joshua's mother, bore the brunt of Steve's unpredictable temper, a temper that also loomed over young Joshua, setting strict boundaries and expectations that would shape his childhood. The Phillips family eventually moved south, leaving behind the cold of Pennsylvania for the warmth of Florida. Across the street lived Maddie Clifton, a vibrant 8-year-old with whom Joshua shared a simple, innocent friendship. They were children, neighbors, and playmates. On November 3rd, 1998, Joshua Phillips and Maddie Clifton decided to play a game of baseball, an innocent pastime that would soon turn tragic. During the game, a stray ball struck Maddie in the eye, causing her to bleed and cry out in pain. Panic set in for Joshua, whose fear of his father's violent temper overrode any sense of rational thought.
Phillips is not a monster, but because of an act that began as an accident and deteriorated through panic that bordered on madness, he engaged in a monstrous act.
To silence Maddie's cries and avoid his father's punishment, Joshua dragged her into his house. The situation rapidly escalated as he struck Maddie with the baseball bat and, in a futile attempt to conceal his actions, hid her body beneath his bed. Soon, the community realized that Maddie was missing. A search was conducted and Joshua joined. They had no idea what Joshua had done. Phillips was ultimately convicted of first-degree murder, a verdict that carried a mandatory sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole.
Now the fierce killer Aiden Fucci. We are in Florida on May the 9th, 2021.
In 2021, a community celebration turned to horror as the body of 13-year-old Tristan Bailey was discovered in a wooded area of St. Johns County, Florida. The young cheerleader had been reported missing just hours earlier. Tristan had been brutally stabbed 100 times.
114 stab wounds, 49 defensive wounds, 35 wounds to the head and neck, 29 to the back and shoulder, and 6 fatal wounds.
The investigation quickly zeroed in on a suspect, a fellow student at Patriot Oaks Academy, 14-year-old Aiden Fucci. Fucci, who lived a short distance from Bailey, was last seen in a haunting video footage walking alongside her on Saddlestone Drive, the same area where her body would later be found. As detectives pieced together the events of that tragic night, the evidence began to mount. A buck knife, with a tip that matched a fragment lodged in Bailey's scalp, was recovered from a nearby pond, linking Fucci to the crime. Blood-stained clothes and shoes were found in his bedroom, along with a notebook filled with violent drawings, unraveling a disturbing portrait of the accused. The case that started as a search for a missing girl had turned into a murder investigation with Aiden Fucci at its center.
This particular crime was committed with the weapon of choice as a knife, which he nicknamed Poker.
As the legal proceedings commenced, the case against Aiden Fucci began to solidify. Initially arrested on a charge of second-degree murder, the gravity of the evidence soon escalated the charge to first-degree murder, premeditated, an indication of the calculated brutality that marked Tristan Bailey's demise. Fucci, a minor, stood before the court, his fate hanging in the balance of the judicial system.
Your Honor, on behalf of Aiden Fucci, we enter a change of plea at this time, entering a guilty plea as charged.
In a stunning turn of events, just before jury selection was to begin in February 2023, Fucci altered the course of his trial by changing his plea to guilty. The knife, the bloodied clothes, the haunting Snapchat selfie Fucci took in the back of a patrol car all painted a grim picture of the night Tristan Bailey was killed. Throughout the process, Fucci remained calm, with little to no emotions with his facial expressions and gestures.
Mr. Fucci, having entered a plea of guilty to the crime of first-degree murder, I adjudicate you guilty of the premeditated first-degree murder of Tristan Bailey. I sentence you to life in prison.
There seemed to be no regret.
Warning! This is a real tough, crude video, because this horrifying murder has been recorded from a video camera. So what you are going to watch is recorded, and it's warning. Really, some images could disturb the sensitivity of the viewers. It's a very tough video, I warn you. This is the case of Carrie Gregg in Mississippi. She was only 15 when she did this horrifying crime.
Brutally murdered her mother and attempted to do the same to her stepfather because she was outed by a friend who revealed she did drugs. What makes Greg's crime particularly chilling is that the act was captured on the home's surveillance camera.
Your sentences will be as follows. As to count one, the jury having fixed the verdict at life imprisonment, this court will sentence you to life imprisonment.
Take a seat at Rankin County District Court in Brandon, Mississippi, where the details of this crime are revealed in the courtroom. 15-year-old Carly Madison Gregg lived with her mother, 40-year-old Ashley Smiley, and her stepfather, Heath Smiley, in Mississippi. From appearances, Gregg seemed like a regular teen until her secret life was revealed to her mother. Ashley Smiley worked as a math teacher at Northwest Rankin High School, where Gregg was a student. According according to court records. On March 19, 2024, a friend of Greg was so worried about the teen's constant use of marijuana, her ownership of several burner phones, and her habit of constantly getting high that he felt compelled to tell Ashley about her daughter's drug use. Greg claimed that her mother's approval meant a lot to her, so when she learned that her mother was aware of her secret life, she got very agitated. When she returned home from school with her mother, she went straight to her parents' bedroom and retrieved a .357 Magnum handgun. Surveillance footage at their home showed Greg wearing a Nirvana t-shirt and wandering around the house while holding something behind her back. She was seen positioned in a way that faced the camera before leaving the room. Minutes later, 3 gunshots and a woman's screams were heard. Greg then returned to the kitchen, still holding the weapon, and then slid onto a stool at the counter and grabbed what was said to be her mother's phone. She then texted her stepfather, luring him to the house while the family dogs hovered around her. At the same time, she invited a friend over, and when the friend arrived, she asked her if she had ever seen a dead body before, and then directed the friend to where her mother lay dead. Nearly an hour later, Heath arrived at the house, and as soon as he opened the door, Greg fired a shot aimed at his face but missed. He then struggled with her and was able to get a hold of the gun before frantically calling the police to report what had happened.
Okay, sir. Where's your wife? She's dead on the floor in my daughter's stepdaughter's room.
She was charged with murder, attempted murder, and tampering with evidence. Her defense team based their argument on insanity, arguing that she had a history of depression, self-harm, and even took prescription medication.
We believe the evidence will show that Carly's parents, who lived with her, were not aware that Carly was suffering from a mental illness.
However, prosecutors countered this claim, highlighting her deliberate actions. Eventually, Greg was offered a plea deal of 40 years in prison, but she declined. Instead, her team insisted on their insanity defense, but that didn't end well for them. She was eventually found guilty of all 3 charges, and, in the end, was sentenced to life in prison without parole.
Your sentences will be as follows. As to count 1, the jury having fixed the verdict at life imprisonment, this court will sentence you to life imprisonment. As to count 2, you'll be sentenced to life imprisonment.
She could be seen crying.
Here we are in New York in January 1980, and the killer here is Eric Smith, and he was only 13.
1980 gained notoriety for committing a heinous crime at a very young age. At just 13 years old, Smith brutally took the life of a 4-year-old boy named Derek Roby in Steuben County, New York, in 1993. This tragic event deeply shocked the community and raised profound questions about the capacity for violence in adolescence and the complexities of the juvenile criminal justice system. On that fateful day, Eric Smith encountered Derek Roby, who was walking alone to a summer camp. Seizing the opportunity, Smith lured the young boy into a secluded wooded area, where he subjected Derek to a vicious and prolonged assault. The nature and brutality of the crime shook the local community to its core, sparking outrage and disbelief. Following the discovery of Derek's lifeless body, a massive manhunt ensued. Eric Smith, with his distinctive red hair and glasses, became the prime suspect. He was apprehended shortly after and quickly confessed to the crime. Smith's confession, coupled with substantial forensic evidence, left no doubt about his guilt. At the time of the crime, Smith was only 13 years old, which prompted intense scrutiny of the juvenile justice system. Many questioned whether a child of Smith's age could fully comprehend the gravity of his actions, and whether it was the right decision to hold him to the same standards as adult offenders. These questions became the focal point of the legal proceedings. After a lengthy trial, Smith was found guilty and charged with second-degree murder. His defense attorney argued that he should be tried as a juvenile. However, the court ruled him as an adult due to the severity of his crime. Smith was handed a sentence of 9 years to life in prison with the possibility of parole. After serving 28 years in prison, Smith was released. Several important details about the case were revealed when Smith's grandfather was interviewed. He echoed Eric's words, saying, "I saw the blonde kid, and I wanted to hurt him." His grandfather, like the rest of the world, was shocked by his
And now, one of the most shocking killer baby in history. He's Kyle Hallwood, only 9 years old. He murdered 5 people. wall.
2019, 9-year-old Kyle Allwood allegedly started a fire that killed 5 family members in their mobile home in Goodfield, Illinois. The victims were 3 young children and 2 adults.
You can see the victims. Damien Wald, 2 years old. Ariel Wall, 1 year old. Catherine Murray, 69 years old. Jason Wall, 34 years old. Rose Allwood, 2 years old. All brutally murdered by Kyle Allwood, who was only 9 years old.
Kyle and his mother survived the fire. 6 months later, Kyle faced charges of 5 counts of first-degree murder, 2 counts of arson, and 1 count of aggravated arson. During his court appearance in October 2019, Kyle had trouble understanding the legal process, so the judge had to explain things to him. Kyle left the courtroom crying with his arms crossed. Because of his age, Kyle cannot be sent to prison if convicted. In Illinois, which is one of 33 states without a minimum age for criminal responsibility, he could face about 5 years of probation, with any punishment ending when he turns 21. His sentence would likely include therapy, counseling, and psychological evaluation. Kyle's mother, Katie Allwood, has defended him, saying he is not a monster and that everyone makes mistakes. She also mentioned that Kyle has been diagnosed with schizophrenia, ADHD, and bipolar disorder.
Everyone is looking at him like he's some kind of monster, but that's not who he is. People make mistakes, and that's what this is. Yes, it was a horrible tragedy, but it's still not something to throw his life away over.